I watched in horror as flames consumed my dream home. 25 years serving as a federal judge, and here I stood helpless while my retirement sanctuary turned to ash. The fire chief avoided my eyes as he handed me the report. Electrical malfunction, he said, but I knew better. 3 weeks earlier, Margaret Thornfield had stood on my doorstep with a smug smile and a foreclosure notice. She thought she had won. The HOA president believed she had finally broken the stubborn retiree who dared refuse membership in her little kingdom. What Margaret did not know was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her miserable life. She had no idea who she was really dealing with. For decades, federal prosecutors whispered my name in courthouse hallways. Defense attorneys prayed their cases would not land on my docket. I was known as the judge who never backed down from corruption, no matter how powerful the defendant. As I stood there watching my home burn, I made a promise. Margaret Thornfield and her corrupt HOA were about to learn exactly why federal criminals feared me. This was war. After 25 years on the federal bench, I thought I had earned my peace. The day I signed my retirement papers, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I had carried for decades. No more death penalty cases. No more organized crime trials. No more sleepless nights wondering if I had made the right decision on someone's life. I wanted anonymity. I wanted quiet mornings with coffee and a newspaper. I wanted to disappear into suburban normalcy and never hear the words, "Your Honor," again. Willowbrook Estates seemed perfect. The real estate agent showed me through the colonial house on Maple Street, and I fell in love immediately. 3 acres of mature oak trees surrounded the property. A small pond reflected the afternoon sun in the backyard. The house itself was everything I had dreamed of during those long years in chambers. The neighbors seemed wonderful at first. Tom and Sarah Chen brought me a casserole on my second day. They told me about the community garden and the annual block party. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street waved every morning as I collected my mail. For the first time in decades, I felt like I could just be a regular person. But even in retirement, I noticed details. I had spent too many years evaluating witnesses and reading between the lines. There were subtle hints that something was not quite right in this suburban paradise. Conversations stopped when I approached. Neighbors exchanged meaningful looks. When I asked Tom about the homeowner association, his smile became forced. "Oh, that is just Margaret being Margaret," he said. "She likes things organized." Then I met Margaret Thornfield herself. She appeared at my door on a Tuesday morning with perfectly styled silver hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. She wore a cream-colored blazer and carried a leather portfolio like she was conducting official business. "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates," she said. "I am Margaret Thornfield, president of our homeowner association. I am so excited to have you join our community family." Something about her calculating gaze made my instincts prickle. 25 years of reading people in courtrooms had taught me to recognize predators. Margaret Thornfield was definitely hunting something. She handed me a thick packet of papers. Just some light reading about our community standards and membership benefits. I am sure you will find everything very reasonable. I thanked her politely and closed the door. The packet contained 47 pages of rules, regulations, and fees, monthly dues of $300, architectural review boards, landscaping requirements, approved paint colors. The list went on and on. I had purchased my property specifically because it was not part of any homeowner association. I had done my research. My deed was clear. I owned my land free and clear with no encumbrances or association memberships. 2 days later, another packet appeared in my mailbox, then another. Then phone calls started. Margaret's voice was always cheerful, but there was steel underneath. "I just wanted to follow up on your membership application," she would say. "I am sure it was just an oversight." After the fifth call, I made my position clear. I was not interested in joining their homeowner association. I had specifically purchased property that was not subject to HOA rules. I thanked her for her time and asked her to remove me from their contact list. The silence on the other end of the line lasted too long. When Margaret finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. "I see," she said. "Well, I hope you reconsider. Willowbrook Estates is such a lovely community. It would be a shame if that changed." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. I had spent decades dealing with people who thought they could intimidate me. Margaret Thornfield had no idea what she was starting. Margaret wasted no time escalating her tactics. The morning after our phone conversation, I found her standing in my driveway at 7 a.m. with two other board members. They were measuring my property lines and taking photographs. "Good morning," Margaret called out with false cheerfulness. "Just conducting our quarterly community assessment. Nothing to worry about." I watched from my kitchen window as they circled my house like vultures. They photographed my mailbox, my garden, even my garbage cans. One of them made notes on a clipboard while pointing at my roof shingles. The certified letters started arriving daily. Each one contained increasingly formal language about community standards and property compliance issues. They claimed my grass was too long. My mailbox was the wrong color. My garden borders were not properly maintained. Every complaint was completely fabricated. My property was immaculate. I had spent thousands of dollars on professional landscaping. But the letters kept coming, each one more demanding than the last. Margaret began spreading rumors throughout the neighborhood. At the grocery store, I overheard her talking to Mrs. Rodriguez. "Property values are already starting to decline," Margaret said loudly. "When you have one non-compliant homeowner, it affects everyone. I just hate to see what this could do to our beautiful community." Mrs. Rodriguez glanced at me nervously and hurried away without her usual friendly greeting. The message was clear. Margaret was turning my neighbors against me. The isolation was deliberate and systematic. Tom and Sarah Chen stopped waving. The family with children who lived next door began bringing their kids inside whenever I appeared in my yard. People crossed the street to avoid talking to me. I installed security cameras around my property. Within a week, they captured exactly what I expected. HOA board members were trespassing on my land regularly, always carrying clipboards and cameras. They measured my driveway. They examined my fence posts. They even tested my sprinkler system without permission. The anonymous notes started appearing in my mailbox. No signatures, just threatening messages printed on plain paper. "Comply or face consequences. Your stubbornness is hurting innocent families. This can all end if you just cooperate." I contacted several local attorneys for advice. The first lawyer I met with was David Patterson, a property law specialist who had been practicing in the area for 20 years. "I have to be honest with you," David said, spreading the HOA documents across his desk. "Margaret Thornfield and this HOA have a reputation. They have forced out 6 homeowners in the past 3 years. They use legal pressure, harassment, and political connections to get what they want." "But I am not a member of their association," I said. "My deed is clear." David nodded grimly. "That does not matter to them. They file frivolous liens, bogus code violations, and manufactured legal claims. They drag you through expensive court battles until you give up and sell. The system is rigged in their favor." He showed me a thick file of similar cases: elderly homeowners who had been bankrupted by legal fees, families who had lost their homes to foreclosure, young couples who had been driven out of the neighborhood by constant harassment. "They target people who cannot fight back," David explained. "Retirees on fixed incomes, single parents, anyone who does not have the resources for a prolonged legal battle." That night, I sat in my study reviewing everything I had learned. Margaret Thornfield was running a systematic operation designed to eliminate property owners who refused to submit to her authority. She used fear, intimidation, and legal abuse to maintain control over her little kingdom. What she did not know was that she had chosen the wrong target this time. I had spent 25 years dealing with criminals who thought they were untouchable. I knew how to gather evidence. I knew how to build a case. And I knew how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. I began documenting everything: every threatening letter, every trespassing incident, every fabricated complaint. I researched Margaret's background and discovered a pattern of similar behavior in 2 previous neighborhoods. She had been forced to resign from leadership positions twice before, but the records had been sealed. The security cameras captured more than just trespassing. They recorded conversations about strategy, coordination between board members, and discussions about which neighbors could be pressured to participate in their campaign. Margaret Thornfield thought she was dealing with a helpless retiree. She was about to learn that she had declared war on a federal judge who had never lost a case that mattered. Margaret escalated to official channels next. Within 2 weeks of our confrontation, I received my first citation from the City Code Enforcement Office. Apparently, my perfectly maintained lawn was somehow in violation of municipal grass height regulations. The inspector who came to my door was clearly uncomfortable. He kept glancing at his paperwork and avoiding eye contact. "I am sorry, sir," he said. "I have to issue this citation. Someone filed a complaint." I measured my grass that afternoon: 2.5 inches high. The city ordinance allowed grass up to 4 inches. The citation was completely fraudulent, but fighting it would require time, legal fees, and multiple court appearances. 3 days later, another citation arrived, this time for improper mailbox installation. My mailbox had been professionally installed by the previous homeowner 5 years earlier. It met all postal service requirements and matched every other mailbox on the street. The pattern became clear quickly. Margaret was using her political connections to weaponize the city bureaucracy against me. Each bogus citation carried fines and court costs. Each one required legal representation and time away from my retirement to fight. But the official harassment was just the beginning. The real psychological warfare started at night. I woke up one morning to find my sprinkler heads had been deliberately damaged, not broken by accident, but carefully cut with wire cutters. Water was flooding my front yard and the street. The repair cost was $800. My mailbox was destroyed the following week. Someone had used a sledgehammer to completely demolish the post and box. My mail was scattered across the street, soaked by an overnight rainstorm. I found pieces of important documents in storm drains 3 blocks away. The garbage incidents were particularly vicious. Every Tuesday morning, I would find my weekly trash bags torn open and scattered across my entire front yard. Coffee grounds, food scraps, and paper waste covered my driveway and landscaping. The cleanup took hours each week. My security cameras captured everything, but the perpetrators were always careful to avoid showing their faces. They wore dark clothing and moved like they knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. Margaret took the psychological campaign public with social media. She created a Facebook page called Willowbrook Estates Community Standards and began posting inflammatory content about property values and neighborhood decline. When one selfish homeowner refuses to participate in community standards, everyone suffers, she wrote. Our beautiful neighborhood is being damaged by someone who thinks the rules do not apply to them. The posts included photographs of my property taken from public areas, with circles and arrows pointing to supposed violations. She encouraged neighbors to share the posts and comment with their concerns. The comments section became a feeding frenzy of manufactured outrage. People who had never spoken to me were calling me a menace to the community. Some suggested I should be forced to sell my home and leave the neighborhood. But Margaret made a critical mistake. She expanded her campaign beyond the neighborhood and began targeting my professional reputation. She somehow discovered my background as a federal judge and started contacting my former colleagues. I learned about this when Judge Patricia Morrison called me at home. Patricia and I had worked together for 15 years, and she sounded confused and concerned. "Robert, I got the strangest call today," she said. "Some woman named Margaret Thornfield claimed you were causing problems in your neighborhood. She wanted to know if you had ever displayed unstable behavior on the bench." My blood ran cold. Margaret was trying to destroy my lifetime of service and reputation. She was attacking not just my property rights, but my legacy and professional standing. She asked very specific questions about your mental health and decision-making abilities, Patricia continued. "I told her it was completely inappropriate and hung up, but I thought you should know." This was no longer just about property rights or HOA membership. Margaret had made it personal. She was trying to destroy everything I had built over 25 years of distinguished service. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I contacted my former law clerk, Jennifer Walsh, who was now a prosecutor in the federal district attorney's office. I explained the situation and asked her to research Margaret Thornfield's background more thoroughly. What Jennifer discovered was explosive. Margaret had been involved in similar schemes in 3 different states. She had been quietly forced to resign from HOA positions twice before, and there were sealed court records suggesting financial impropriety and conspiracy charges that had been dropped due to lack of evidence. I realized I was not dealing with a petty neighborhood bully. Margaret Thornfield was a career criminal who had perfected a system of legal extortion and property theft. She had stolen homes from vulnerable families for years, and now she thought she could do the same to me. She had no idea that she had just declared war on someone who had spent decades bringing down criminals far more sophisticated than her. The gloves were coming off. The final assault came on a cold Tuesday morning in November. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Margaret Thornfield standing on my porch with 2 sheriff's deputies and a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. Margaret's smile was triumphant as I opened the door. She looked like a general who had just won a decisive battle. "Good morning, Robert," she said. "I believe you know why we are here." The man in the suit stepped forward and handed me an official document. "Sir, I am serving you with a notice of public nuisance declaration and immediate compliance order. Your property has been declared a threat to community health and safety." I scanned the document quickly. The city had accepted the HOA's petition and declared my property a public nuisance based on fabricated complaints about structural damage, environmental hazards, and code violations. None of it was true, but the legal language was official and binding. You have 72 hours to bring your property into full compliance with all cited violations, the man continued. Failure to comply will result in forced sale of the property to recover city costs and penalties. Margaret could barely contain her glee. I tried to work with you, Robert. I really did. But you left us no choice. The community has to be protected from people who think they are above the law. After they left, I sat in my kitchen staring at the legal documents. The list of required corrections was impossible to complete in 72 hours. Replace the roof, rebuild the foundation, install new electrical systems. The estimated cost was over $200,000, and that was assuming I could find contractors available immediately. It was a trap designed to be impossible to escape. Margaret had perfected this system. Create fake violations, get official city backing, demand impossible compliance, then force the sale when the homeowner inevitably failed to meet the requirements. I called David Patterson immediately, but his response was what I expected. "Robert, I hate to say this, but they have you cornered," he said. "The political connections run too deep. Margaret's family has been involved in city politics for 3 generations. The mayor, the city council, half the planning commission, they all owe favors to the Thornfield family." That afternoon, I attended the city council meeting to make one final appeal. The chambers were packed with HOA supporters. Margaret sat in the front row with her board members, all wearing matching blue blazers like a uniformed army. When my turn came to speak, the jeering started immediately. "Sell your house and leave," someone shouted. "Stop hurting our property values," another voice called out. Mayor Patricia Hallbrook banged her gavel for order, but I could see in her eyes that the decision had already been made. She was reading from prepared notes, not listening to my arguments. "Mr. Thompson, the city has to prioritize the welfare of the entire community," she said. "Individual property rights cannot supersede public safety and community standards." It was a complete perversion of justice, delivered with bureaucratic doublespeak. I realized that fighting through normal channels was hopeless. The corruption ran too deep, and the system was rigged against anyone who challenged Margaret's authority. That evening, I discovered just how systematic Margaret's operation had become. My security cameras captured a celebration on the sidewalk outside my house. Margaret and her board members were drinking champagne and taking photographs of themselves in front of my property. I turned up the audio recording and listened to their conversation. "Phase 1 complete," Margaret was saying. "Once we force the sale, we can subdivide the 3 acres into 6 lots. The profit margin should be around $2 million after legal costs." "What about the other non-compliant properties?" asked one of the board members. "Same strategy," Margaret replied. "The Johnson family on Oak Street is next, then the elderly couple on Pine Avenue. We should be able to clear out all the resistors within 18 months. I sat in my darkened study listening to this conversation, and everything became crystal clear. This was not about community standards or property values. This was about real estate theft and profit. Margaret had turned the HOA into a criminal enterprise that systematically targeted vulnerable homeowners and stole their properties through legal manipulation. She had done this before. She would continue doing it after I was gone, unless someone stopped her. The next morning, I made the phone call that would change everything. I contacted my former law clerk Jennifer Walsh and arranged a meeting for that afternoon. It was time to reveal my true identity and background to my legal team. Jennifer arrived at my house at 2 p.m. with a briefcase full of research and a look of grim determination on her face. Jennifer, I said, I need you to understand something. I am not just a retired homeowner being bullied by an HOA. I am federal judge Robert Thompson, and I have spent 25 years prosecuting criminals exactly like Margaret Thornfield. Her eyes widened as the implication sank in. Judge Thompson, if that is true, then everything they have done to you constitutes federal crimes. Mail fraud, conspiracy, extortion, civil rights violations under color of law. Exactly, I said. And I have been documenting everything. Every threat, every fabricated document, every illegal act. I have enough evidence to destroy Margaret Thornfield and everyone who has helped her. That night, I sat in my study preparing for war. Margaret Thornfield thought she had won. She thought she was dealing with a helpless retiree who would quietly surrender and disappear. She was about to learn the biggest lesson of her criminal career. She had not defeated a vulnerable homeowner. She had awakened a federal judge who had never lost a case that mattered. And this case mattered more than any I had ever tried. I called Margaret Thornfield the next morning and asked for a meeting. My voice was calm, almost defeated. I told her I was ready to discuss surrender terms and wanted to meet with the entire HOA board to negotiate my departure from the community. Margaret's voice was smug and victorious. I think that is a very wise decision, Robert. I am sure we can work out something that benefits everyone. We arranged to meet at the Willowbrook Estates Community Center that evening at 7 p.m. Margaret promised to bring the entire board so we could finalize everything in one meeting. I spent the afternoon preparing. I put on my best navy suit, the one I wore for the most important court proceedings. I packed my briefcase with 25 years of federal judicial credentials, bar admissions, and legal documentation. Most importantly, I included every piece of evidence I had gathered about Margaret's criminal enterprise. The community center was brightly lit when I arrived. Through the windows, I could see Margaret and 6 board members seated around a conference table. They were laughing and passing around documents. A bottle of champagne sat on ice nearby, ready for their victory celebration. I walked slowly across the parking lot, briefcase in hand. This was the moment I had been building toward for months. Margaret Thornfield was about to learn exactly who she had been harassing. I entered the meeting room quietly. The conversation stopped immediately, and all eyes turned toward me. Margaret stood up with a patronizing smile. "Robert, thank you for being reasonable about this situation," she said. "I have prepared all the paperwork for the property transfer. We just need your signature on a few documents." I set my briefcase on the table and opened it slowly. "Before we discuss any paperwork, I think there are some things you should know about me." I removed my federal judicial commission and placed it on the table. Then my bar admission certificates. Then my law degree from Harvard. Then photographs of me presiding over major federal trials. The room fell completely silent. Margaret's smile froze on her face as she stared at the documents. "My name is Federal Judge Robert Thompson," I said calmly. "I have served on the federal bench for 25 years. I have presided over organized crime trials, public corruption cases, and federal racketeering prosecutions." Margaret's face went pale. One of the board members dropped his pen. Another whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. "For the past 6 months, you have been conducting a systematic campaign of harassment, fraud, and extortion against a sitting federal judge," I continued. "Every threatening letter, every fabricated citation, every act of vandalism has been documented and recorded." I opened a second folder and began placing photographs on the table. Images of the damaged sprinkler heads, the destroyed mailbox, the scattered garbage, the trespassing incidents captured on security cameras. Mail fraud, I said, pointing to the fake HOA documents. Conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, civil rights violations under color of law, attempted theft of property through fraudulent legal proceedings. Margaret's hands were shaking now. The color had completely drained from her face. "This is not possible," she whispered. "You are just a retiree. You live in a suburban neighborhood." "I live in a suburban neighborhood because I chose to retire here," I replied. "But I remain a federal judge with full authority to investigate federal crimes, and every single action your organization has taken against me constitutes a federal felony." I placed a thick stack of legal documents on the table. "These are copies of federal criminal statutes that you have violated. Each violation carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison." The board members were looking at each other with panic in their eyes. Two of them stood up and moved toward the door, clearly wanting to distance themselves from Margaret immediately. "Sit down," I said with quiet authority. "Nobody leaves until we finish this conversation." The command was delivered with the same tone I had used in courtrooms for 25 years. Everyone sat down immediately. "Now let me explain what is going to happen," I continued. "You have exactly 48 hours to withdraw every lien, every citation, every legal action, and every complaint you have filed against my property. You will issue public apologies to me and to every other homeowner you have harassed. You will dissolve this corrupt organization immediately." Margaret tried to speak, but no words came out. She looked like she was going to be sick. "If you fail to comply within 48 hours, I will file federal criminal charges against every person in this room. I will personally ensure that you are prosecuted to the fullest extent of federal law, and I will make sure that your systematic theft of properties from vulnerable families becomes national news." I closed my briefcase and stood up. "Margaret, you thought you were bullying a helpless retiree. Instead, you have spent 6 months committing federal crimes against one of the most feared judges in this district. Defense attorneys pray their cases do not land on my docket. Federal prosecutors consider me their secret weapon against organized crime." I walked toward the door, then turned back for one final statement. "You have 48 hours. I suggest you use them wisely." The silence in that room was deafening as I left. 25 years of federal judicial authority had just been unleashed on a small-time criminal who thought she was untouchable. Margaret Thornfield's reign of terror was about to end. Margaret's world began collapsing within hours of our meeting. By 10 a.m. the next morning, my security cameras captured her packing frantically in her driveway while screaming into her phone. "You have to help me," she was shouting. "This changes everything. He is a federal judge." But the response she received was not what she expected. I watched through my window as her phone conversations became increasingly desperate. One by one, her allies were abandoning her. The first board member to break ranks was Patricia Collins, the HOA treasurer. She appeared at my door at noon with a manila envelope and tears streaming down her face. "Judge Thompson, I am so sorry," she said. "I never knew who you were. I never wanted to be part of this. Margaret told us you were just a troublemaker who was hurting property values." She handed me the envelope. "These are copies of all the financial records, the bank accounts, the property transfer documents, everything. Margaret has been stealing money from forced sales for 3 years. She made us all accessories to federal crimes." The documents revealed the full scope of Margaret's operation. She had forced the sale of 11 properties over 3 years, generating over $4 million in illegal profits. The money had been funneled through fake HOA accounts and shell companies. By evening, 3 more board members had contacted my attorney with offers to cooperate in exchange for immunity. The conspiracy was unraveling as each participant tried to save themselves by exposing the others. Margaret's attorney, William Hartley, abandoned her on Wednesday morning. He called my phone directly. "Judge Thompson, I need you to know that I had no knowledge of my client's background or activities," he said. "I am withdrawing representation immediately and will be cooperating fully with any federal investigation." Even Margaret's political connections were cutting ties. Mayor Patricia Hallbrook called me personally to apologize and promise a full investigation of the city's role in the harassment campaign. "Judge Thompson, I had no idea about Mrs. Thornfield's background or methods," she said. "The city will be reviewing all citations and orders issued in connection with this matter. We will make this right." But Margaret was not giving up without a fight. My security cameras captured her attempts to destroy evidence on Wednesday night. She was in her backyard burning documents in a metal trash can. The footage was crystal clear, showing her feeding papers into the flames while looking around nervously. Federal investigators arrived on Thursday morning. I had filed a formal complaint with the FBI, and they were treating this as a priority case involving crimes against a federal judge. Agent Sarah Martinez led the investigation team. "Judge Thompson, we are taking this very seriously," she said. "Crimes against federal officials carry enhanced penalties, and the evidence you have provided is extremely comprehensive." The investigation moved quickly. Bank records were seized. Computer hard drives were confiscated. Phone records were subpoenaed. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit began tracing the money from forced property sales. By Thursday afternoon, Margaret realized her situation was hopeless. She made one final desperate attempt to contact me directly, calling my phone and begging for mercy. "Please, Judge Thompson," she sobbed. "I have grandchildren. I never meant for it to go this far. I was just trying to maintain property values." "Margaret," I said calmly, "you have spent 3 years destroying families and stealing their homes. You targeted elderly couples, single mothers, and vulnerable people who could not fight back. You showed them no mercy." "I will give everything back," she promised. "I will dissolve the HOA. I will make full restitution." "The 48-hour deadline was Tuesday at 7 p.m., I replied. "You chose to fight instead of surrender. Now you face the consequences." The deadline came and went with no compliance from the HOA. Every lien remained in place. Every citation stood. Margaret had chosen to gamble on her political connections and legal manipulations rather than face the reality of her situation. On Friday morning, exactly 48 hours after my ultimatum, I made the call to Agent Martinez. "Agent Martinez, the HOA has failed to comply with my demands," I said. "Please proceed with federal charges against all participants." Margaret Thornfield had been given a chance to surrender gracefully. Instead, she had chosen to fight a federal judge with the same tactics she used against helpless homeowners. It was the worst decision of her criminal career. The arrests began at dawn on Monday morning. I watched from my kitchen window as FBI agents surrounded Margaret's house with tactical precision. She was led away in handcuffs, still wearing her bathrobe, while neighbors gathered on the sidewalk in shocked silence. 3 other board members were arrested simultaneously at their homes. The local news crews arrived within an hour, turning our quiet suburban street into a media circus. The headline on the evening news was everything I could have hoped for. Federal judge exposes HOA corruption ring. The charges were devastating. Margaret faced 18 federal felony counts including mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, extortion, and civil rights violations. Each count carried a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. The financial investigation revealed the full scope of her crimes. Margaret had stolen over $4 million from forced property sales. She had targeted 43 homeowners over 3 years, successfully driving out 11 families and attempting to steal their properties. The trial was assigned to Judge Patricia Morrison, my former colleague who had warned me about Margaret's threatening phone calls. Patricia showed no mercy during sentencing. "Mrs. Thornfield, you have violated the most sacred trust of community leadership," Patricia said from the bench. "You preyed upon vulnerable families and used the legal system as a weapon against innocent people. This court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison without possibility of parole." The 3 board members who cooperated received reduced sentences of 3 to 5 years. The attorney who withdrew his representation was not charged. The city officials who had been manipulated agreed to oversight reforms and community restitution. The civil lawsuits followed quickly. Every family that had been victimized by Margaret's scheme filed claims for damages. The HOA's insurance company settled for $12 million, providing full compensation for stolen properties and emotional distress. My own property was completely cleared of all liens and citations within a week of Margaret's arrest. The city issued a formal public apology and covered all of my legal expenses. Mayor Holbrook appeared at my door personally to deliver the apology letter. "Judge Thompson, the city of Willowbrook deeply regrets the harassment you endured," she said. "We have implemented new oversight procedures to ensure this never happens again." The corrupt HOA was dissolved permanently. The remaining legitimate homeowners formed a new community organization with proper legal oversight and transparency requirements. I was asked to serve as an advisory board member, which I accepted. The most satisfying part of the resolution was hearing from the other victims. Tom and Sarah Chin came to my house with tears in their eyes. "Judge Thompson, we wanted to thank you," Sarah said. "We were so scared of Margaret that we stopped talking to you. We are ashamed of how we acted." "Margaret told us you were crazy and dangerous," Tom added. "She said you would hurt our property values and bring crime to the neighborhood. We were so wrong to believe her." Mrs. Rodriguez brought me a homemade apple pie and a handwritten note. "Thank you for having the courage to fight back," she wrote. "You saved our community from a terrible person." The most meaningful visit came from Jennifer Walsh, my former law clerk who had helped build the case against Margaret. "Judge Thompson, you have shown me what real justice looks like," she said. "You could have used your influence to make this go away quietly. Instead, you chose to protect other families from being victimized." As autumn turned to winter, I finally found the peace I had been seeking in retirement. My morning coffee by the pond was no longer interrupted by threatening letters or harassing phone calls. The mature oak trees provided the quiet sanctuary I had dreamed of during my years on the bench. I established a legal aid clinic to help homeowners facing HOA abuse. Using my experience and connections, I created a network of attorneys who specialize in fighting corrupt homeowner associations. The Margaret Thornfield case became a blueprint for identifying and prosecuting similar schemes nationwide. Sometimes in the evening, I stand in my backyard and look across the 3 acres that Margaret tried to steal from me. The pond reflects the sunset just as it did on my first day here. The difference is that now I am truly home, surrounded by neighbors who have become genuine friends rather than enemies. Margaret Thornfield learned too late that some people cannot be intimidated, no matter how powerful the opposition appears. She discovered that justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied when the right person decides to fight back. My retirement sanctuary was finally secure,